Hey, everybody. Hey, I got another episode on the theme of procurement and how it plays into our deals. Because somehow, some way, it gets to procurement, hopefully, and so few people understand how it works. Now, one of my first jobs when I was in college was doing procurement. It wasn't at a big company. But now when I look back, I go, it kind of taught me about sales in that, salespeople would drop by, they would call in. And if I didn't have a request, a need, there was no sense talking. But they'd always want to take me out to sporting events and stuff. But, I was kind of in the decision-making process, but not really a decision maker. And I tried not to be a decision maker. But today we're going to talk to somebody who was in procurement at a big company. Now, this may not fit and most likely does not fit your sale. The point here is to understand procurement, understand how it fits into a company, how they get rewarded, how they think, what they do during the day, what they care about, how they get their promotions. Why? Because then you understand how to speak to them, what they care about, and how to engage them. Now, each company is different that you sell to. Big companies, they may pull procurement in at the very beginning. If it's a huge deal, they may want to make sure they're there. They might have legal there. They might have shipping and receiving there. That might be good. I've been to a sales call where there were like 30 people in the initial meeting. They had everybody from shipping and receiving to from facilities, procurement, legal, and of course it's a goat rodeo, meaning that everyone's got their own interests and concerns, and it was way too early for all those people. But I don't control that. I showed up and I did my part. So today we're going to talk about all these issues, and I think what you have to do as a rep is really kind of review other deals that you've done, talk to your other reps, and kind of get a sense of when do they get involved, how do they get involved, what do they really care about, and what is really a smokescreen, like them asking for discount, and it all coming down to price. And I think we get into that in this interview, and we talk it through. And even though this person is maybe from a different country, maybe your country, I don't know who's listening, but the perspective is interesting and it's something that we have to learn. So let's go through the interview. I'll sum it up at the end and I'll give everybody who's in the course an update. Here we go. Hey Jens, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Yeah, look, Brian, I've been a buyer, professional buyer all my career. And I always found it very exciting, the interaction between buyers and sellers. And so I let you and your listeners decide if, buying is the bright side or the dark side. For me personally, it was always the bright side. I think it's a perfect function, maybe the best function in the world, but probably you guys say the same about sales. But after my corporate career, I founded my own consultancy company. And what we do today, together with a few ex-colleagues of mine, we consult predominantly procurement teams on how to set their procurement strategies, operational procedures, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we're doing this now for 2 years, roughly. And what we've realized that more and more of our ex-suppliers, of our salespeople that we've been working with in the past for our corporate jobs, that they are reaching out to us and asking us, Jens, could you not explain us a little bit more on how procurement operates, how they tick? For us, they are a black box. And for us, that was, as a team here, that was a bit of a rude awakening and something very surprising because we weren't aware that sales did perceive procurement in a bit of a negative way. I mean, we always knew in the negotiation of it, there's always a back and forth, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but we always thought it's a mutually beneficial relationship. But what we received as feedback from our ex-suppliers was, well, you guys are more of a blocker. We rather do cold calling than interact with procurement. I think that was one of the feedback that I liked the most, actually. And that was something that made us then think, wow, that is actually incredible. I mean, we weren't aware, and that's what we do now more and more, that we try to explain to sales teams that there is actually, there can be a beneficial or a great relationship with your procurement person that you're interacting with. You can actually form a relationship that is beneficial for you and the buyer and for both organizations. And that's what we do now more and more.
Now, let's describe the type of buying you are doing, because there's all kinds. There's buying of known things, repeat items, where you have many different choices. And then there's kind of more unique things where there's a user of a particular product wants to buy this product and kind of goes through the internal process and then goes to procurement. And I think a lot of salespeople in that case, they see it as purely an administrative process, issue the purchase order. What type of buying were you doing?
So I was doing all kinds of. So I started my career at Procter & Gamble, and Procter & Gamble is fairly advanced in the procurement process and function and discipline as such. So you have what you described, or what we would describe as indirect, which is more services, where you indeed go through a very, thorough internal review process, what the actual business needs are. And then you have on the other side what we would call as buyers, direct materials, a certain resin that goes into a plastic bottle or whatever it might be, a more standardized product, a more commoditized product that you need to buy. So I was covering the whole range, but you're absolutely right, Brian, that it really, for me as a buyer, it's more of how specific is the product or service that you're buying. Can it be defined nicely? Can it be boxed up in a certain category? Or is it more, or does it more depend on qualitative evaluations, right? That's more how we make the distinctions. And obviously, the more you cannot specify, the more difficult it gets also for you as a buyer internally then to explain why should we select supplier A versus supplier B? What is the difference between the two services or product that they're offering? That makes it difficult for the buyer internally as well. But I think just on that note, though, Brian, it's funny because the most sellers that we talk to, salespeople that we talk to, they weren't aware that internally we as buyers pretty much do the same job that you guys do as a seller as well. We need to discuss internally with our internal stakeholders what is actually the business need that they're pursuing, right? What is it that they actually want? The classic example that I always give is, well, an internal stakeholder could approach me as buyer and say, look, Jens, buy me some washing machines. And I might be saying, well, is that really your need, or is not you need clean clothes, right? And there's various ways on how you get clean clothes, right? You can wash it yourself, you can get it to a outsourced provider, or you can get indeed a washing machine. But this is the process that a buyer goes through. We need to interact with our internal stakeholders to really understand what their need is. Then we become, or try to become, market experts for how can we deliver how can we fulfill that need that we've identified, and then we go out to our supply base to see who is the best provider to offer us that service or product. So I think this is something that I always try to explain to sales individuals, that we do actually an internal sales job as well to identify what the actual need is.
And how do people within the department get compensated? Is it is any of it based off of price or bargaining or? you see where I'm going.
Absolutely, yeah, Brian. Look, I mean, price will always be a component, right? I mean, absolutely, and everybody loves a barter, right? Everybody loves a discount. I mean, that will never go away, right? And for sure, one set of KPIs is definitely price. Now, let's just quickly stay on that very KPI. Price versus what, right? And I think that's something that sales individuals need to understand as well. It could be a price versus a budget. It could be a price versus last year. It could be all sorts of things. Now, in most of the cases, I would say 95% of the cases, it's the price versus a budget. I think as a salesperson, you want to understand first, what is the budget? And second, how is that budget being created, right? And in most organizations, it's the procurement organization that is being tasked by a CFO, by the finance team, to say, what is going to be the budget for a certain category, for a certain service, for a certain product? over the next 12 months? How will prices develop in the market? Now, how will that buyer decide this? How will they try to come up with that price? Obviously, they will do market research, but the first, go-to person that they're going to pick is their suppliers, right? So I had people in my team that pretty much copy-pasted, and I was, super mad with them, but that's what they did, and a lot of people do that. They copy-pasted material slides from the suppliers into a finance presentation to say, look, this is what the price development is going to be. This is what we're hearing in the market. But that just tells you the story, that if you form a trusting relationship with your procurement person, you can actually relay the message and can already instill a certain message with regards to where the price is going to be at in the market before you even start negotiating. You can already relay that message during the budget setting process. But what I would really like to say, though, Brian, is that price is not everything. So we consult still a lot of procurement teams, and we've just been with a large FMCG company the other day, and their 5-year vision has no longer the word cost savings in it. Cost saving is something of the past. Yes, there will always be that discussion about price, but innovation, sustainability, diversity considerations, operational efficiencies, all these things do play a much, much larger role. You will no longer get a promotion as a procurement person just to cut the price by 10%. You might get a tap on the shoulder, but that's it. There's so many other factors, KPIs that play a role. That price is sometimes overestimated. But, a lot of salespeople tell me that, though. Look, my relationship with my buyer is all about price. And what we then always say is, I think you've approached the buyer too late in the process. Yeah. You might have been interacting with the internal user, of your product, of service, very early on in the process, but you neglected the relationship with the buyer. And if that is the case, then probably the discussion will be only along the lines of price, yeah.
But again, how did you get promoted? How did you get judged as far as how well you did your job?
Yeah. So for us, it was mostly building relationships in larger companies in particular, but also in smaller companies these days. 80% of product innovation, service innovation comes from external providers, right? Yeah. And there it's not price. Again, price plays a role. I don't want to discount that. But innovation, product, process innovation comes from external parties. So we were judged on how much innovation do you bring into the company, how much proposals or project proposals do you trigger with your suppliers. Another factor was how much, this is probably more on the operational front, how much spend was under management. This is a very important factor, especially for listed companies. Spend under management. So just to elaborate on that point a little bit, it's a boring point, but if you don't tick that box, you don't get promoted. Yeah. Especially the finance community is super concerned with rogue spending in companies. And your task as procurement leaders to make sure that whatever is spent in the company is somewhat controlled by a process, and ideally through a procurement process. So you are judged, or everybody is judged pretty much every quarter to say, okay, how much spend do you have under contract with your respective suppliers? And if you have then a supplier that is delaying the contract negotiation process or not really interested in settling on a contractual agreement, and not with a commercial person such as a sales individual. Close the deals, put contracts in place, because that delivers against the KPI that the buyer has, and that is part of the promotion package. You will not get a promotion if you don't have your contract under spend, I can guarantee you. So innovation, projects, driving sales and enabling growth for the company. Another big factor is service levels, right? You cannot imagine how much time buyers spend with internal discussions with, let's say, production leaders or IT directors to say, hey, the supplier that you selected, Jens, is not delivering against the SLA. Please follow up and make sure it's going to work now, right? And these are the things that get you the promotion by selecting suppliers that are not only are there for you when you negotiate the deal, but that are there continuously to drive operational efficiency, that make you shine in the organization, amongst your peers and against the needs that the internal stakeholders have. That's where you can really make a difference for your buyer and get him promoted in the end of the day.
And how about the annual audit? Was that feared?
Annual audit, what do you mean by that?
Where the auditors come in and audit the procurements to make sure that everything's in order.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that process is definitely there. And, well, we all love that process, right? I guess you guys have that on the sales front as well.
Well, I mean, that's, I dealt with procurement people my whole life. And, when you look at, I'd say from my perspective, from the outside, and I did procurement when I was in college,
right.
They were more judged by how clean the transaction was.
It is definitely, you need to follow certain procedures, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want, look, I mean, it's obviously, it's procurement people sometimes, manage 80% of the P&L. So we're talking big money here, right? So you obviously don't want to, and some buyers, maybe they on their desk, on their daily job, manage like 500 million in expenditures for the company. So you want to make sure that you choose and pick your suppliers, not based on, well, Brian invited me to a fancy restaurant, and that's the reason why I'm allocated $100 million in spend, right? Yeah. So you want to make sure that you follow the process. And there's definitely policies in place that you need to follow. So some companies, for instance, say if the spend is above, let's say, 2 million, 3 million, whatever the threshold might be, you need to go out to at least 3 suppliers to make sure that you have understood the market and chosen a market based on capabilities and not because you like Brian, right? So there's definitely things that you need to do. You need to put sourcing strategies in place, and that is these things that you mentioned that are audited. Did you follow the process? Have you followed the approval lines? Why did you make the decision a certain way? Of course, these things have to be in place because you deal at times with a lot of money. One thing in this audit process that most people don't know as well is, did you make sure as buyer that your suppliers get paid, right? This is becoming more and more important. You as company and as buying organization, you want to be perceived as a good corporate citizen, right? You want to be perceived that you pay your suppliers so that the suppliers actually want to do business with you. So it's also a hard KPI, by the way. So you could have the situation where invoices are not being paid because of the formats are not being followed, or the supplier or the sales teams is not onboarded on what kind of format to use, et cetera, et cetera. So you as buyer, you're responsible to make sure that your supplier has all the information, that they are linked up with EDI, automated data interactions, et cetera, to make the payment process as smooth as possible. And this is being audited as well. So there's a lot of components there that buyers need to keep an eye on. And if you as salesperson understand these things, you can deliver tremendous value, which have nothing to do with price. So yeah.
And what did you and most procurement people like from a salesperson?
I mean, I always enjoyed very much if we could, we always like a good negotiation, right? Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, everybody loves that, but then let's keep the negotiation aside. Let's put the contract into a drawer, and then let's build value together. That's what I always enjoyed. When somebody really fully understood what my internal business challenges were, what the challenges were of my end consumer, people that brought in information, not confidential information, but at least information about what my competitors are doing, right? So that I could pick up that information and go to my internal stakeholders, could go to my CEO, could go to my marketing team or R&D team to say, look, I heard something in the market from this great supplier, from this great salesperson, and they say we should be doing X, Y, Z. Why don't we, trigger a project? And these kind of things, Brian, you can probably only do when you formed a trusting relationship, that you know that you have a supplier and a salesperson that really delivers against your expectations, and you don't need to be concerned all the time that, excuse my French, will screw you over, right? So when you've built that trusting relationship, you can really focus on something that is really driving value. And what I always also appreciate is salespeople that know what they actually want. You cannot imagine how many sales meetings I've been, and when you asked the person, okay, where do you see yourself and your company with us, in the relationship with us in the next 3 years, and there's 20 seconds of silence, then you know it's not a trusting relationship, and probably it's not worthwhile investing into the supplier. Sellers and salespeople that know, that have a vision on what they want to achieve, that goes above and beyond just making the quarter. Yeah. That is where you can generate value, and that's what I always enjoyed.
And how about, what did you not like? Who were the people that you just didn't want to work with, no matter how good their price was or their offering?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, probably it's industry specific, Brian. I think my worst is probably a strong word, but let's say let's call it worst. My worst experience were with people that sold me IT services, software, and these kind of things. Because for some strange reason in that area, and I only found it out really after the fact, now that I'm doing the job that I'm doing now, that there's a pre-sales team, a technical sales team, a normal sales team that negotiates with you, an after-sales team. So all these different people, and they're probably there for a good reason, right? But when you're in a buyer's position and you don't know really the structure of a sales organization, you perceive that as just another person that comes in there. You need to re-explain why we're actually doing business, right? And it is highly frustrating, right? And it is and I'm talking about large companies. I'm not talking about mom and pop shop. I'm talking really reputable, IT organization providers that I would have at least believed that should know it better. But hey, and that is highly frustrating. And as a buyer, you spend maybe 5 to 10, 15% of your time interacting with suppliers. Unfortunately, the rest of the time is just operational stuff, unfortunately. So when you then have to explain 20 times what you actually want to achieve, what your goals are and what the goals should be in the interaction with your supplier, that can get very frustrating. So I can only encourage everyone, make sure that you have somewhat of an account structure where one person is really owning the whole process. Yeah. Also after the contract has been signed. Because, if you only see your sales rep every 3 years when you renegotiate price, it is not good enough.
And what are you doing today? How are you helping out your clients?
Yeah, we really, again, one element of our business is really the procurement side. It's probably not so of interest for your audience, Brian, but we really go into sales teams and try to just tell our story, right? That's what we think where we can add most value. Just to say, look, this is how we've done it. This is what procurement can do for you. They can be your internal advocates. If you really deliver against their needs, then you can have a marvelous relationship that is not about price. And we worked on some training programs which are linked to what we've done at our times at Procter & Gamble, where we really were tasked to build winning supplier relationships, because especially in the FMCG world, you rely heavily on suppliers to deliver innovation for you. So that's what we do. We try to really tell our story and try to shed some light that procurement can be actually a partner and not only the dark side as some of you might perceive it to be.
Well, it's dark if we don't know it already. And I think that certainly in the U.S. and in certain markets, when a request for information or a request for proposal comes out of an account that we have no interaction with, we tend to believe that it's already wired for somebody else, and that this we just what they call column fodder. We're just filling in the spreadsheet so that you've done the due diligence. Is that something you've experienced or can talk to?
Yes, and I think rightfully so. You should be suspicious, right? There's definitely no doubt about it that as I was mentioning early on, there might be policies in place where procurement folks are tasked to say to reach out to multiple suppliers just to sense check that the actual supplier that they have in mind is actually in line with market prices. So I think what I always tell people is, if somebody reaches out to you with an RFQ, RFP, and you've never interacted with that company before, I think probably is not worth it. But that should tell you the story that you've missed out there, actually, because I have you as on the radar screen. I wouldn't reach out to you, Brian, as a provider, even if I just want to have you as a benchmark, if I wouldn't believe that you could be a benchmark, right? Yeah. So I think that tells you already, if you're being approached and you have never spoken to that company or procurement person before, that's maybe a miss. And you can build on that. I mean, if the fact that I've approached you is that I have you in my file, so I would just reach out to the procurement person and say, look, at the moment we unfortunately cannot, fulfill your need on the RFQ because we don't have enough time, whatever it might be, right? But I would like to continue to have the conversation and maybe explain you on what great value we can offer to you. Because the RFQ and RFP process, sometimes it's just a tick boxing exercise and not really a decision-making vehicle, I would say.
Yeah. And how about as far as salespeople directly contacting procurement about the things that procurement has, as opposed to hitting up the end user or the people who make, who do market studies?
Yeah, I think that is a very, very large field, Brian. I mean, one thing that I can tell you, what I always hated, to give me a cold call at 1 p.m. on a Friday. Let me tell you, I have to get ready for the weekend. I have to make sure that my supply chain, my suppliers are lined up so they're not screwing up over the weekend, so that I get a call on Sunday from my chief operating officer, yelling at me that a supplier didn't deliver. So I have a lot to do on a Friday afternoon. So that's maybe one advice that I can give you. But joke aside, I mean, there's you need to read a bit how the organization is structured. There's definitely companies out there where procurement doesn't play really as big of a role as they, in my opinion at least, as they should. There's definitely budget owners, internal users that say, well, how difficult can it be to buy something? I bought a carpet the other day, so I can buy also my IT equipment for the next 5 years. Right? So there's still a view of some that say procurement is actually not a professional function, it's just,
administrative.
Correct, yes. Yeah. So now, what is though true, what we see, the statistics that we run and the insights that we have in procurement and companies is that a lot of CEOs and CFOs are actually mandating to procurement, you guys need to spend everything, or you need to at least control how money is being spent. So the situation that you can find yourself easily in as sales is you come in, you have a great relationship with the internal user, you pretty much have a 3-month discussion and they're already happy and want to go with you. You maybe already negotiated prices with them and they say, yeah, Brian, you get the business. And then say, whoops, by the way, there's a mandate coming from the CEO that we actually need to involve our procurement team now. And then I come in and I'm obviously super frustrated with my internal user that they didn't involve us up front. And I might be a bit frustrated with you as well, Brian, because you didn't reach out to me. So, and I obviously need to make sure that I showcase to my internal user that I'm actually of value. I'm not just a administrative function. I can actually negotiate, and negotiating is an art. So I'm probably going to push you very hard on price, Brian, just to make the case for the internal user and for you that next time you better contact me. So I'm trying to be a bit provocative here, Brian, but I think this is really what easily can happen in where you can find yourself into. If you haven't read the situation, what's going on, the internal politics of the organization, you can easily fall victim to that environment.
Yeah, because I certainly experienced that in the larger organizations as well as with the government, is that all of a sudden, procurement, because of procurement vehicles, color of money, pre-established agreements, all of this stuff could really shape the decision as opposed to how good the product is and what it costs.
Yeah. I mean, in well-run organizations, you normally have the internal user might be reaching out to you and then in parallel informing the procurement function, hey, we have this great provider of a service and we have this need. Procurement, can you help us to evaluate if that supplier is actually the right supplier? Is there other alternatives out there in the market? This is a collaborative approach. And even better, when you're on that radar screen of the buyer as a provider, as a salesperson that can deliver value to the organization, they will serve as internal advocates, right? Especially in large organization or government organization, as you just described, Brian, where you have various business units, various business streams. If you do a great job for one business unit, for one brand, obviously the buyer will go and advocate for you for the other brands, right? If you've done a fantastic job in terms of innovation, operational efficiencies, you signed my contract, fantastic. The invoicing process is fabulous. Then obviously that kind of quality standard will get relayed to other decision makers in the organization. And probably decision makers that you would have never gotten in contact in the first place with, right? So your buyer can be a strong internal advocate to generate business for you.
Excellent. Hey, this has been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect up with you and learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, I mean, they can always find me on LinkedIn, Jens Henschel, under my profile name, or go onto our website, www.fiveeyes.io. That's FIVIS.io.
I found that interesting because it varies company to company. Now, his view was, when he's talking to his clients, was, procurement's in the way. And where he worked, procurement was kind of part of the critical process and decision making, both on the administrative side, partially legal, compliance side, and the getting things done side. Viewing them as the enemy is not the right approach. Now, I tried to push into all the things that I've heard, the myths about discounting, how they get rewarded. A lot of people say, they get comped based off of the discounts they get. I'm sure that exists somewhere. I honestly have never seen it. And you can't really make blanket statements one way or the other. And I think a lot of what people say is self-serving and cop-outs, rationalization, victimization, versus what's really true. I think most people are just good, solid people. They want to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, they're covering their butt. They want to get promoted. They want to have a secure, reliable job. And there's a lot more to it than just, typing in the product number and the price and issuing a purchase order. Because when it's done wrong, they really get slapped. And that's how they get reviewed in most cases. So think through this. And also, don't underestimate how long it takes. I've seen companies that have 6 weeks to issue a purchase order from the time they get the request. You have to understand the internal administrative process. Now, if you work at a reasonably good-sized company, more than a mom-and-pop 10-person company, go around, go talk to your procurement. Who does the procurement when you guys buy something? How do you buy it? How do you account for it? How do you trace it? How do you, have the bookkeeping and audit it? It might be a good conversation. I'm sure you have somebody in accounting. They may be outsourced, but buy them lunch. Take them out for cocktails. Understand it, because now you got to understand what your clients are going through. Too many of us think, we just give them a quote and they run down to procurement and you get the order. Well, I wish it worked that way. So these are ones that you might want to listen to every time you've got a deal stuck or before you give that final quote. And a parting tip is, if you've given a discount to anybody at the account, make sure it's the best and final, and trial close it this way. Just say, now, we typically don't do this, but if we make this concession, I need your personal guarantee that this will be the last and no one else will ask. And most likely everyone will say yes, but it won't be true. Everyone's going to keep asking it. But then you reference back to that person and make sure that person has budget authority, has economic influence. Doesn't have to be the CEO, but it's got to be reasonably high up in the organization. It has some clout. I hope you enjoyed this. I would check this out again. Really appreciate everybody who's listening to the podcast. Please check out my partners, Co-Video for video email, and Pipe Drive with the Brutal Truth coupon code. You get 60 days for free. Try it out. If you don't like it, don't buy it. But I'm sure you'll love it. I've been using it for years. It's really growing. They got chatbots now. They've got calendar, email tracking. It's fantastic. Hey, anybody who's in the course, make sure you're checking out the office hours. They post every other Friday. And there's unlimited one-on-ones, 30-minute Zoom calls with me to talk about applying the course to a particular situation or clarifying the course or how to get into a particular account. We walk through it, and we can do it as often as you like. And it really gives you the opportunity to talk to somebody else, because my motive is to help you double your income. And that's kind of what I'm looking to do. And when I built the course, I go, if somebody really does this, spends an hour a week applying themselves to their craft, this is what you do. No one taught you this in college. Your company's not teaching you. Certainly your manager's not teaching you this. If you're a manager out there and you just want to have your reps be coached by somebody else, this is the perfect opportunity. It's not expensive at all. It's the price of a meal. One course is about a lunch and another course is about a dinner. A month, and you can have unlimited coach, somebody to talk to, walk through, and you get to listen to others. It's all anonymous. I never use anyone's name, company, customer, product. So unless somebody recognizes your voice, and if you want, I'll search the database to see if there's anybody that you know in the course. So I think this is something that everyone's getting a lot out of, because if you're in the course, you get to hear other people, what they're up against, how they resolve it, and just discuss the issues and different angles of taking it from somebody who did it longer than I care to remember. So let's make this year your year. There's still a little bit of time, plenty of time left to crush it, and we're going into some slow parts of the year. So go to b2brevenue.com. You can get a free ebook there, but you can schedule a call to talk over to see if the course is right for you. The people who it's right for are B2B salespeople who either want to get into big accounts or want to have more control over closing the complex sale. And what you do is you basically break it down into simple things that I've seen work forever, that I've developed over the years, that I've been teaching for a while now, and they just work. So go there, schedule a call, and we get in there. Plus, you get office hours every other Friday to ask questions, listen to use cases. I come up with summaries and new ideas every other Friday for that. And it's all put back into the course. So there's community, content, and coaching. All that. I'm giving it away. Can't believe this. I got to stop this. Also, tell one person this week about the Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. There's two others. There's a Sales Questions podcast, a daily podcast answering your questions about sales, and the B2B Revenue Leadership Show, which is a leadership show. We talk to CEOs, CMOs, CROs about how they're growing their business today. So check them out. We'll see you next time.